Let's talk money.
I don't have your money.
I know I'd be a lot happier with some extra cash.
Is this about money?
Obviously, this is all about money.
Oh, man, we got bills to pay, buddy.
With practical tips and a focus on scripture, let's talk money. With Dave and Reb. From More Than Enough. Real conversations about money for real people. Let's talk money.
Are you ready to talk money, Reb?
I'm ready to talk money.
We were just talking on the way in about my low voice this morning.
It's particularly low this morning.
I've got my coffee voice on for sure. So welcome to the show that Dave and Reb, Dave with his low voice this morning, talk about the hard issues around money. And we have a very special guest that we have not had in the studio, which I am not going to introduce quite yet. But if you're on YouTube, you can probably see her. So there you go. But here we are. So, I'm excited to have our guest with us today, and we're keeping you in suspense, of course, because we like to do that. Reb, today's show
is sponsored by notmine.ca and Financial Discipleship Canada.
And if you want to listen to the podcast or you want to learn a little bit more about notmine.ca, head over to the website. The podcast is there, but there is so much more content there. We really lean on the Financial Discipleship group for some of the content that we just recommend when people come say, hey, we need some content or we need a study.
Because the content on their website, one of which is my book.
Yes, of course. It is. It is.
Yeah, we lean on them because my book is...
We like to share content.
I couldn't resist.
We like to share content.
Okay, yes.
Because at More Than Enough, what do? We work on the implementation part.
Yes.
We work on the let's walk with you to make the change.
Yes.
But sometimes you do need education or you do need some information.
And Ray has some great blogs over there, and Jan.
Very thoughtful.
Yes.
So check out notmine.ca. Thank you, the group at Financial Discipleship Canada, for sponsoring today's show. Mm-hmm. And away we go. We are.
So, do you ever feel when you're talking or when you're thinking about talking about money, and you think tonight's the night we're going to talk about it, and then something happens, your kid gets sick, you're cleaning up. Whatever. Your
husband makes a off-the-cuff comment.
Right, and then you get mad, and then you have to do the dishes, and then someone says, oh, I'm going to a party. I forgot to tell you, can you drive me? And then that anticipation of talking money with your spouse or your family.
Which, by the way, has to happen before 9 o'clock.
Okay, all of a sudden, you feel like, I just can't do this anymore. I'm definitely not talking about it. Or you actually start talking about it and you get way more triggered. Mm-hmm. So
for me, I will say
does that happen to you?
It generally actually starts much earlier in the day.
Okay.
It's like, you're like, okay, I'm looking at my day. Okay, we have our financial date tonight. Okay, it's just one of the things on the agenda. And then as I go through the day, the pile just seems to get more. And so by the time I get to usually the last or one of the last things on my agenda, and I'm like, I'm just like, I can't do it.
So interestingly enough, we're going to talk about this and we're going to get some tips how to manage this, but we're also going to give you vocabulary because we have a very special lady in our midst. And we've already said that. Her name's Amanda Van Noppen. And of course, you probably recognize the last name is the same. So you are related. Amanda, welcome here.
That's her maiden name, though. Just
yeah. Oh, I know. I know, but it's her professional name. I went on her.
Okay.
I went on her website.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You have to keep the Van Noppen. It's too special.
Anyway, Amanda, welcome here. You are a practicing psychotherapist in the Ottawa area. Mm-hmm. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So outside of being your niece, I'm part of the amazing Van Noppen family. I'm a psychotherapist. I work, just outside of the Ottawa area. I work in person in Kemptville, and then I do virtual, and I also do a nature-based work, which is going outside and doing therapy out there, because sometimes we actually function a little bit better outside than in an office. I don't know if anyone else relates to that. And then outside of my kind of professional career, I'm a owner of 2 lovely dogs who drive me crazy, and a wife of a wonderful husband, and a renovator of an old home that seems to continue to break down no matter how many times we fix it.
Yes.
So you can relate to the whole money, navigating this money world very well, which is one of the reasons why, we got connected on some of the practical parts that's happening internally to us when we go down the money path. And that's what we're going to talk today about, what you call a window of tolerance. So, but before I'm going to get you to define that. We're going to leap in. I wanted just to read this verse from Philippians 4. We all know it. If you grew up in the church, you know it. And we often take it out of the context of what Paul is writing. But for the sake of today, I want to relate it to what I already said. Sometimes we feel totally unable to talk about money in a way that doesn't freak us out or get us angry. And but Paul says, he's talking to the church in Philippi, and he says to them, I praise the Lord that you're concerned about me again. I know you've always been concerned for me, but you didn't have the chance to help me. Not that I was ever in need, for I've learned how to be content with whatever I have. I know how to live on almost nothing or with everything. I've learned the secret of living in every situation, whether it's with a full stomach or empty, with plenty or little. And I'm reading these things and I'm like, wow, that's just amazing in itself. But then he says why he can be all of these things. And it's for I can do everything through Christ who gives me strength. And we toss that one out really glibly sometimes, but I think in relation to what we're going to talk about today, when you think it's impossible, inside yourself, sometimes it feels impossible. But if we remember the truth that God gives us in his word, that it is possible with Christ. And he said it even in John 15, abide in me. For apart from me, you can do nothing. If we at least give our financial dates or these financial discussions or that financial thinking, even when we're just still thinking about it in our head, and we say, Christ, I can't do it, but you can do it. I'll do it with you, or you're in me, so it's possible. So I just thought it was an appropriate verse for the conversation we're having today. Amanda, can you tell us what is a window of tolerance and why is this important for thinking about money or talking about money?
Yeah, really, the window of tolerance is it's just a label, right? It's just a phrase to understand an experience that I think we've all had. So when we talk about the window of tolerance, it's this idea of when we can think and make decisions and feel in control, we're kind of in our window of tolerance.
Right.
And when we slip out of that window, or something kind of puts us out of that window, we start to feel less in control. And we have all of a sudden this more impulsive, instinctual actions. And that shows up in lots of different ways. But when it's happening, we often feel like, oh no, I just made a super impulsive decision, or I just reacted really emotionally and I don't really know why. So when we can identify our window of tolerance, we can say, this is when I'm in my window to make decisions,
right,
and when I'm not really, and I need to do something to adjust to make that change.
I think it's really, really important, and I'm not a big label guy, but I do like common language, right? So we can say, hey, Reb and I, how are you coming into your meeting or into our money meeting? And I can say, I'm right on the edge of my window of tolerance. It gives us both, we understand that language. And it also goes, okay, so before we get into it, how do we move you kind of more into maybe I'm outside my window of tolerance, but how do we move back in? So I love that. I love that the common language that we can have that practically goes, okay. And I don't, again, if you've heard the show before, I don't guess when it comes to Reb. I might look at her and I might see, oh my goodness.
That's a good policy for everyone, I feel.
The smoke's coming out of her ears. I can see all the signs. Yeah. But in the end, I'm going to go, okay, honey, I truly want to know where you're at right now at this moment. And then I have to wait. I've learned to wait so that Reb can articulate that to me. And sometimes she can't. She's like, I can't talk about it right now. Okay, well, then I know.
Well, I had an interesting thing happen yesterday. This isn't directly related to money, but I was very outside. I was like, we're going to talk about fight, flight, or freeze in a minute, but I was very much there. Well, I think lately in the stress of COVID, and I think there's a lot of us living outside of our windows with, you got COVID, and then you have this, all of a sudden everything's happening in the world and it's going 10 times as fast as ever. And, people are getting sick, or like, it seems like everything's happening to everybody. Maybe someone's having a really great life out there, and
someone hopefully is having a good day.
Someone's having a really great life.
I know, but
it feels like everybody you talk to, oh yeah, my mom's sick, or or like my dog just threw up on my couch. I mean, that was Amanda's little story this morning. But yesterday, Dave came in and we were talking about this event someone had invite us to, and Dave's like, I don't know if that's in our wheelhouse. Well, I just like pounced on him. I was just like, what do you mean? Like, what are you thinking? This is exactly in our wheelhouse. And then I'm like, okay, just a moment. And then I step back. I'm like, so what makes you feel that this is a good spot? Like, I was like, but that all, so I'm laughing at myself internally while I'm doing this. But I mean, that's our training as coaches, actually. So I've learned to do that, but I was like, oh man, this is not, but I could do it, but I still felt the stress, right?
Yeah.
So,
and I think, using your example, but also thinking about the 100 other examples and speak to that, Amanda, is a lot of times it is about the timing, right? So there, I walk into the room, there's another conversation going on, or however that happened yesterday. But all of a sudden, it's like I say something and it's like poof, the window blows up, right? It's like, okay. So speak to that in terms of the timing a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're right. Sometimes there's little things that slowly are kind of making that window less and less for us, right? Like you kind of said, if we're doing dishes and then the kids are asking things, and then, on the back of our mind, we have stress about debt. And we're thinking about that. And then we're worried about what our partner's going to say and all of those things. Those can be slow things. But then something can happen, right? Where we're kind of holding it all together and we're maybe at that top of that window. And then something happens that seems like the small thing, right? The thing that doesn't matter at all. And it can shatter everything because we're actually kind of at that limit. And the brain has what I call kind of like a switch that at a certain point it says, the thinking and planning and decision making is not what we need right now. We need instincts. We need to move quickly. We need to survive. And it flips a switch and it takes us to a different system. And that's that breaking of the window feeling, right?
Right.
And someone who walks into that, you probably felt like, what? I haven't done anything. All I asked her was, this kind of simple question, and she's way overreacting. Right. And I think that's where we get a lot of miscommunication, even as couples, right? As we're trying to discuss money and things like that. It's like, why are you freaking out about this thing that's happening, right? Why are you suddenly reacting with anger or tears or sadness, right? Why is this happening? But when we kind of do the zoom out and we look at it, we can say, right, maybe all day you were at the end of your window and this one extra stress has just kind of piled it on.
And I knew all day that I was like on that verge. So I had to be very like, I was at least in a place I could step back and see it. But there are maybe people out there who.
But I think too, I could have escalated that very quickly, right?
Totally.
So, Reb responded to me, and we'll use this example because it's a great one. And of course, I'm like, okay, I know what's going on. I never called it the window of tolerance, but here we are.
You knew
That's
it.
some new language today, right? And we're going, okay, that. I was not expecting that. But let's just, quite literally, I'm sure there was probably a 20-second pause as Reb and I looked at each other. Me kind of trying to figure out, where do we go with this? Do we actually engage this conversation at this time? And Reb, of course, she's thinking, and I didn't know that, but she's thinking, wait a minute, I got to reel myself back because I just kind of blew past and I got to kind of come back. And I know for us, and maybe we should save that for our solutions or tips. I'm going to save that for the tips. So we'll talk a bit.
But we've kind of said these things, and we've all heard the phrase like fight, flight, or freeze. Do you want to talk about those three?
Yeah.
That what might be happening when you're in a financial discussion?
Yeah. Because you're right. We are hearing it more often, which is great, right? You kind of hear people say, oh no, like I'm going into fight or flight or something. And I mean, at its basics, it's just a survival instinct. It's this beautiful, actually adaptive feature that our brains have that says like, when things start to become overwhelming, we're going to prioritize.
Right.
And the brain says, you've got a lot going on here in this brain. You've, adapted and grown so much as like a human being. You have so much going on. We can't use it all right now in this kind of stressful moment. And so it simplifies it. And it says, what are the most important things that need to happen right now? We either need to get away. We either need to fight what's attacking us, or we need to make ourselves small enough that we won't get attacked. Right? And if you think about it in the wild, it makes perfect sense. And if we didn't have it, we wouldn't survive. Right. Unfortunately,
it doesn't work in relationships so well.
It can be tough, right?
Yes.
In the life that we have constructed as human beings now, where the things that make us feel unsafe and things that put us in that survival mode is less like lions and bears chasing us and more triggered memories from our past and feeling unloved and abandoned by our partners and stuff like that. Right.
Yeah.
And losing everything that we have, losing our money, feeling like we don't have independence. Those are the things that kind of trigger our brain into survival mode. And so it appears, and oftentimes our brains feel very confused because they think they're doing something helpful for us. And then the other side of our brain says, it's not helpful for me. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
So
well, that makes me
confusing.
feel way better. Just saying, I feel this state of confusion quite a bit, quite often. So I'm really happy to hear that.
It is a beautiful way because you're also making it, because I know your desire also to remove shame from people's stories, right? So there is a certain thing that people might feel even in the conversation initially, like, oh, well, I'm just terrible because I'm outside my window of tolerance.
Yeah.
And we're actually saying, no, this is actually a part of how your body and your brain is trying to protect itself, I guess.
Yeah.
But also knowing, what do we do? How do we move past it? Because it's not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's where I say, when we identify where we're at, so when we can kind of identify, because there's kind of two sides of the window of tolerance, right? There's that fight and flight, which is what we talk about most often in survival states. Yeah. And we often know what that feels like. It's the pounding heart, the sweaty palms, the probably what you were feeling yesterday, right? The frazzled brain, the one, I can't make decisions. Everything's flying at me too quickly.
Yes.
My brain doesn't feel like it's catching up.
Yes, that's exactly how I felt. Should I make an appointment with you? I'm like, if we weren't related, I'd come visit you. Anyway.
The other side of that, though, is the side that we actually don't talk about often. And I think it's a side that comes up a lot when we're having communications with partners because we have tendencies to one side or the other. Our brain has a tendency to kind of, some of us are more fight and flight type people, survival people, and some of us are what I call like the freeze or the numb side. Right. And we go into this state of survival that's disconnected. And I usually use the example of like a possum.
Right.
Like a possum who like flops on the ground, or a deer in the headlights when you're driving. We're all in the country.
Right.
Yeah. And in the end,
And for somebody on the outside kind of looking at that and going, like, the car's coming at you, the headlights are there, you should be moving. Right? Like, move. Exactly. I've been in the car where I'm going,
you're honking the horn.
Move.
Yes.
And they're just not. Right?
Yeah. And that adaptive feature of the brain is to say, I don't want to feel pain. So I'll actually take the receptors, the way that we feel pain, I'll actually remove that from you. Wow. I'm going to flood your brain with this kind of what we call disassociation, but it's just this numb state that says you don't actually have to process everything.
Right.
You don't have to feel it. And so if something bad happens to you, then you don't have to go through that thing fully. You can go through that only in a part.
Good. So we've got, we've kind of got these fight or flight
Yep.
state, right? So
Yeah.
we've got our window of tolerance. We've blown that out, right?
Yep.
So we're outside of our window of tolerance, and the response then is in fight or flight.
Yeah.
I'm gonna attack. Between a relationship, or I'm going to attack.
Or
Sometimes
run.
that's even when you're you start beating up on yourself,
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
you're doing that
Internally or externally.
Yep.
Wow.
And then you've got so that's the fight, and then you've got the flight where you're like, okay, I'm just going to run away.
Yeah, sorry,
Right?
I'm
So-
busy with work. I can't do the financial date. I'm gone.
Just out of here.
Let's
right?
procrastinate that to the
and
end
again,
of the world.
that can be internal and external,
Yep.
right? So we can do that internally and just kind of move to another spot and
Yep.
say, forget it.
Yep.
And then we have this numbness,
Yeah.
right? So which again is another mechanism. I'm outside of my window of tolerance. I'm trying to do, and our brains are going, okay, we're just going to go numb. We're just going to
Yep.
play possum and
Yep.
do that. Now we're there. What do we
Nice.
do now?
What do we do?
How do we get out of there?
Yeah, like we've got a big
Yes.
bill coming up and we have to
Yes.
have a discussion.
Yeah.
But like,
Because we can't avoid stress, right?
No.
That's the
No.
thing is
Yeah.
what we tend to want to do is say, okay, here's my window of tolerance. I will only do things that let me stay within that window of tolerance. And then when I'm out of it, I will stop doing the thing and I'll avoid it, right?
Right.
which in money's case is very dangerous because
Doesn't
then you're
make it better.
you're not facing it. You can't bury your head in the sand. You have
Yes.
financial responsibility. So what are some things that we can do?
Yeah. So the first thing I always say is we have to speak the language of what the brain is speaking right now. So if the brain has turned off thinking, planning mode, right?
Right.
And we're in that
You're
mode,
numb. Yeah.
then we can't tell our brain, stop doing that.
Right.
Let's plan for this not to be this way, right? Because think about it, that part of the brain is actually shut off.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't work anymore. So we have to use the other parts of the brain, and those ones are sensation-based and body-based,
Okay.
right? So they are not thinking so much, they are feeling.
Right.
And so we respond in that way. And so that looks like, there's kind of like the stereotypical words that we use, but that's the grounding, right? That's the mindfulness. That's the reconnecting. And all those words just mean speak the body's language.
So what do you do?
So we're in
What does
fight
that
and
mean?
Yeah. good point. So when we're in fight and flight, let's take, Aunt Rebecca
Yeah,
yesterday.
yes.
So she's in fight and flight. She has all these things happening. And then Uncle Dave walks in and throws a whole nother thing on her plate and the window is shattered. She's in fight or flight. You actually did it. So you did a step back and you probably took a deep breath
I did.
somewhere along that
Oh,
way.
yeah, I did.
Right? And therapists get some bad rap for talking about breath work all the time because it's a bit obsessive. But the thing that a deep breath actually tells our brain is it tells it to switch systems.
Okay.
When
Wow.
we're breathing deeply, our brain reads that as, I guess there's no threat because we wouldn't breathe deeply if
Right.
there was. We would breathe shallowly.
And that's really pausing there to go, if we pay attention to our bodies when
Yeah.
we're in that, what are we doing?
Yeah.
I'm
Clenching,
holding myself,
right?
I'm
Everything.
taking a big breath,
Yep.
but I'm not letting it out until I figure out.
Yeah.
So interesting.
So what you want to do is kind of reconnect that body. So I always say there's different strategies for everyone, but figuring out what actually calms your body down and doing it when you're not, say when you're not at like level 3,000 out of your window of tolerance, but level, 10 out of your tolerance and saying, okay, what works for me? For me, taking a hot shower and just letting the water run through my body, letting it relax, breathing, and then coming back to that conversation. Okay, I'm better.
Okay.
I can do
'Cause
it.
You remove yourself, but you actually aren't doing it to run away.
I'm not doing it. I'm calming my body.
Yes.
Right. And that kind of connects, sensations like warm water, cold water,
Okay.
that sort of thing. Other things, though, can be really helpful. Some of us are touch people. So having your partner give you a hug actually self-regulates. So our bodies are meant to and designed to regulate with another body, right? And so having someone else hug us or give us a pat on the back, any of those things can sometimes pull us out of that.
So that's
Tight.
really interesting because there's been a little, Reb doesn't even know I do this, so I'm going to come out here.
We're hearing the
on show.
secrets.
Wow, I love that.
So one of the things that I've done probably the last, I'm going to say number of years is when I recognize that Reb is kind of at that
Yeah.
10, sometimes I'll just take her face in my hands and I'll just look into her
Yeah.
eyes. I started doing that because somebody told me that when you're in flight or flight mode, your pupils are different sizes. So I started doing that to actually see if it was true.
So it started as an experiment, not as a helpful
a little
thing.
bit, right? You know, so
Wow.
I didn't tell you that because I was like, this is really weird. But I didn't notice that your pupils were different sizes. But I did notice that everything just calmed down, that we could go, okay.
True.
And
Yeah.
so, and then
is true.
sometimes it would turn
Yeah.
into a hug, but sometimes it would just be like, we're just going to take a minute to look in each other's
Yeah.
face.
Yeah.
And we have this saying around money that we'd say, I'm not your enemy and you're not my enemy when it comes to money. So sometimes I'd say, hey, honey, I'm not your enemy here. And just reminding each other that it's not that we're in huge conflict. And I love this word that she's moved outside or I've moved outside of that window of tolerance. And it's one of the ways that it's actually come back in without me even really knowing that that's what was going on.
Yeah. And you're probably talking in a slow, deep, clear
But
voice, right?
Matt, because what he's saying to me is, I see you.
Yeah.
I see you're stressed. And I know we're coming to the very end of the show.
I know
And
we
it's
only got like
I don't
2
know how
minutes
many
left.
more tips you have for us, Amanda, but
I think that's a great one, though, to connect with is when our brains are in fight and flight or in that numb state, we're often looking for connection, right?
wow.
Because we're made for connection.
Right.
Human beings are made to be together, right? And so something that can be extremely helpful is having connection. If it's connection with ourselves, right? Taking that moment like Reb did to say like, okay, what's going on for me? Whew, things are going wild. But that
breathing.
moment.
So remembering to breathe. Right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
good,
yeah.
So what if you're in the numb? We're gonna
Yeah,
we're
let's
near
talk
the end
about
of the
numb.
show. So what if we're in numb? This is the end of the
Numb is interesting because we actually have to increase some activity. Our natural numb state, when we go into numb, we tend to stare at the wall. We tend to go on social media. We tend to space out. So we actually usually have to do something. Go for a walk, get some activity in our body, reconnect in that way that actually feels like our bodies are doing something. And so sometimes that can be saying like, babe, I need to take the financial talk outside. Let's go for a walk.
Wow.
Let's
that's a
kind
great
of
idea.
move ourselves. Or I need to go to the gym before I do this financial
and that might be coming into it, right? So again, if I've had a long day and I'm like, okay, I know I'm just on the edge of my window of tolerance. And my tendency is to go numb. Again, you have to figure that out. Then I might say, you know what? We'll do it, but I got to do 15 minutes in the gym. I'm going to go for a hard run. Or as you said, maybe we go for a walk or something like that so that we can actually have a productive conversation around money.
Yeah.
So just at the end, just to tell listeners, I think I'm going to ask you, Amanda, we're going to make a little blog for the website with the tips so that that'll run alongside this show. This today, and that way people can have it as a reference.
Absolutely.
And then go back to it as well. And you can add anything else that we didn't talk about today. So thank you for being here. Amanda is coming back this year in a couple months because we have a whole bunch of topics to talk to you about. So you're going to be a bit of a regular through our year.
I'm excited.
So am I. It's great. Thanks for coming.
Well, let's pray for a second. Lord, we just thank you for this time. We thank you for your grace to us, and we give you all the glory in Christ's name. Again, thank you, Amanda, for coming. Thank you for joining us.
And NotMine.ca for sponsoring.
And what a conversation. There's many more to come. Join us next week when we talk money.
Let's Talk Money is a division of More Than Enough Financial Fitness, where God is transforming hearts and bringing hope for today and freedom for tomorrow. For more information or to comment on today's show, please visit morethanenough.ca.